Hey, I'm putting the little guy to bed. Tried to keep him up as late as I could, but I think he's going down for the count.
Oh, night-night, kid. Happy New Year. Hey, by the way, hey. Who's this?
Huh?
Yeah, it's Spawn. 2-0 is... That's 20th. It was his 20th anniversary.
You know, I wonder if Todd McFarlane had 2-year-olds in mind when he said his big dream was to make Spawn a household name.
I don't know, Sarah. He had a whole hockey team of 10-year-olds, so who knows? Night-night, kid.
As long as he's not reading it.
Oh, he's going to be wearing Spawn pajamas before he's reading Spawn. Especially issue 5.
Oh, yeah. Well, are you, planning to come up and watch the ball drop? I figured the world didn't end, so we should celebrate.
Sarah, I've got so much to do. I've got this whole vault I'm doing with the Spawn stuff. I've got a whole rewind to edit before I go to bed. I'm covered up.
Your fans will understand. It's a holiday.
I know, but I lost so much time with all that traveling we did for Christmas. I was really counting on tonight.
Can you at least come up just before midnight and have some champagne?
Oh yeah, of course. I can do that.
Okay. And, don't drink too much of this stuff, okay?
I'll do my level best!
Okay.
Night, kid!
Welcome to the afterlife, Captain Logan. You're dead.
Doomsvince, what are you doing here? And what's with all the candles? And where's my Mountain Dew?
I told you, you're dead, and I'm God.
You are not God! Wait a minute. Are we doing a reenactment of Tapestry?
Tapestry? What is this tapestry?
You know, the Next Gen episode where Picard goes to Limbo and Q pretends he's God.
You know I don't watch Star Trek. Really, you're dead. I'm God.
Alright, if you're God, then what's with the pitchfork?
God has an affinity for pointy things? Okay, fine, I'm not really God.
Then what are you doing here?
Well, it's like this. You're only kinda dead.
Kinda dead. Like Buffy at the end of season 2?
More like Buffy at the end of season 5. Only she goes to heaven, comes back to life, and you're in a purgatory of your own making!
So, was that just some lame, cliched metaphor for my life, or are you actually serious?
You're in a coma.
Really?
Yes, really. A Mountain Dew-induced sugar coma.
Man, I hate it when that happens.
You don't have to believe me. You can sit here for all of eternity, just waiting for something to happen, but it won't. These candles will never go out, and that computer is not a real computer. It will never turn on, and you'll never be able to communicate with the outside world again. And there is nothing between this desk and those stairs but black abyss. Or I could give you a way out. All I command is 1 year of your time.
You want me to be one of your minions?
You could never cut it as a doomsayer. What were you reading? before you blacked out?
It was, Spawn 220.
How was it?
Yeah, it was, I don't remember.
Oh, you will. In a couple 100 days or so.
Come to think of it, I can't remember anything about Spawn. What did you do?
Not much. I only took away every recollection you have connected to Spawn.
Oh, so even in my dreams your villain plots suck.
Again, this is a purgatory of your own making. Do not deny me my melodrama. I am the only hope you have of returning to your wife and child.
Okay, alright, I'm listening.
For the next 365 consecutive days, you will review one Spawn item a day.
Why?
Because I can choose any elf for you that I wish, and I've chosen this one. It was either that or a full year of Power Rangers. I was going to call it Morphin Year. It would have been awesome. But instead I've chosen Spawn because it's much more brooding and atmospheric. And if you fail, I get to throw you into a grave and bury you alive.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, so now I have your attention. Maybe I should have led with that. Okay, so here's the deal, Captain Logan. So everyone loves you because you're so good at reviewing things. That's all you ever do. Review things and drink Mountain Dew. Well, look what that's gotten you.
As far as I can tell, it hasn't necessarily gotten me anywhere but my own basement.
Silence! Each day you will review one Spawn-related item. You will record it in a notebook that I will provide to you instead of a word processor because I thought it would be mean.
And what happens if I don't? I just stay here?
Not exactly. Believe me now? Consider this your new home for the next year, Captain Logan. Or for as long as you can stand it. By your feet is a grave. Inside that grave is 365 days worth of Spawn paraphernalia. Each day, one item will be revealed. You will study that item and write a critique. You will not be allowed to read ahead. If you fail to review any item before midnight on the day it is assigned, you will be buried alive with the rest of the items in the grave. If you manage to get through everything, despite the inconsistencies, the slow pacing, the convoluted stories, and that really weird abstract period, I will return you to your wife and child. If you refuse my challenge, I will return you to the office. That isn't really your office. To sit in the dark, with nothing to review, and there you will remain bored for all eternity. Do you accept my challenge?
Yes. I accept your challenge.
Excellent. Get to work. You have much to do before the first day of Spawn Year.
Well, I don't see a grave filled with Spawn stuff.
That's what the shovel is for. Start digging. Oh, and Captain Logan. Happy New Year. I am Doomsvince, and this is day 1 of Spawn Year.
Todd McFarlane isn't really a writer. He's an artist, and a genius artist at that. He opens the first issue by establishing location. First the planet Earth, then New York City. We have the sense that this world is bigger than just Earth, and that our protagonist has been somewhere else. He says, "I want to die. Again." So much given in so few words and such minimal pictures. The first page makes me want to read on, and I wonder if the next 365 days might not be as daunting as I expect. The next page, the classic, stoic, shadowy figure against the foreboding nighttime urban landscape. Our protagonist asks a simple question. Why? What happened to this man? Why is he dressed this way? Why was he brought back to life? I'm completely intrigued by this atmosphere and pacing, and astounded at the command of narrative this artist is presenting. Then, bam! A page of 3 news anchors for exposition that takes 3 or 4 minutes to read. I suddenly know about 4 times more about Al Simmons than he currently, because of hell-induced amnesia, knows about himself. I was all set to get these answers along with the protagonist, to feel the torture of finding out he has a wife he can never be with again, even though he's returned to Earth, that someone close to him betrayed him and caused his death, and that he's a monstrous, disgusting, charred corpse, all as he gets those answers. I don't generally like an amnesia plot, but I'm going with it because McFarlane is competent enough to show Al already getting pieces of the puzzle in issue 1. I feel I can trust that the speed hell reveals Al's past to him is fast enough for me. I don't need this external exposition to tell me Al was a covert ops agent who killed for a living, when I'm just going to see Al himself learn that later. I suppose McFarlane has 3 anchors to make the point that news is always presented through a filter, but he's trying really hard to make an entertainment news host talking about Spawn make sense. I doubt anyone in the history of the world has ever said, "Those spikes and chains are simply darling," prior to this. And worse, this news anchor page happens twice. We see an American flag over Al's casket in his memory. We don't need to be told he had a military funeral. Also, do covert ops agents get voted one of the 10 sexiest men of the year? Would they really be that high profile? I like that Spawn is presented, without question, as a superhero. Al sees he's wearing a costume and instantly starts beating up rapists in an alley. Neither he or I really know very much about him, but he can't be a terrible guy using his new flashy green powers to help people. The costume is brilliantly eye-catching, especially the cape, and even behind his mask, Spawn is expressive. I see brooding Spawn, confident Spawn, surprise Spawn, sad Spawn, and my personal favorite, unimaginable agony face Spawn, surrounded by little bubbles. The introduction of main supporting characters, detectives Sam and Twitch, is a single page that expertly introduces their archetypes of loudmouth, perpetually irritated fat cop, and his little-spoken but sarcastic and highly intelligent partner, while also providing information on the mystery of murdered members of the mob. That's how you do exposition. I suddenly have all this information before I can say, mystery of murdered members of the mob, and I didn't need 3 random talking heads to give it to me. Sometimes the comic feels like a commercial for another comic, with 3 references to Youngbloods, and one is even in bold typeface. Even with distractions like that, it's a confident book that gives every indication it's going in a sure direction, with the mysterious clock that sometimes shows up and starts counting down from 9999, and the appearance of a hideous, devilish monster at the end who promises to make, well, hell for Al. Does the issue make me want to continue? Absolutely. Am I ready for an entire year of this? Well, I suppose I have no choice. Signed, Captain Logan.
I am Doomsvents, and this is day 60 of Spawn Year.
Today, 2 comic books popped up out of the open grave. One was the comic that comes with the Spawnmobile, the single silliest toy Doomsvents has given me all year, and I must already be losing it a little. I haven't been able to stop playing with it since I got it. Hey, I wonder what flies farther, the skull on the back of the car or Overkill's head? Despite all the laughs I had with the other figure comics, this one really takes the cake. It's Spawn vs. Overkill, who Spawn takes out with the completely unexplained, overly decaled Spawnmobile to showcase all the features of the toy. And I finally got to see something I've been hoping for weeks. Overkill's head shooting off his body in the panel of a comic book. I didn't care what happened after that. I wasn't going to let anything ruin my day. And I love how brooding the comic tries to be even after Spawn uses a souped-up race car to beat up a supervillain. It will take much more to erase the darkness in his soul. The only thing that could have made this better would have been the Spawn clock. Conjuring your own race car with gun turrets that pop out costs 5 units of energy. I quickly wished that was the only item up for review today. The second comic was from the board game. Oh no. This wasn't just about comics, I realized. This was about my losing condition when I played the Spawn Super Nintendo game 10 days ago. Doomsvent said I would have to play a game against him. This must be it. On the other side of the comic are the instructions for the game. I can never be sure of anything in this graveyard, but my instincts told me I'd better study these rules. He didn't give me any when I played the video game. The comic is another cartoonish battle, Spawn versus a Violator-esque monster that talks like Scooby-Doo. Spawn beats him the same way he beats Overkill in the other comic I read today. He just runs him down with a Spawnmobile. He doesn't even need guns or a big skull projectile this time. This version of Spawn is hilarious. That car is his answer to everything. I'm just imagining Spawn hiding it under a bunch of trash in the alley and getting it stolen from him when he's not looking. So then I read the instructions for the board game, without having the actual game in front of me. These rules are just as convoluted and overwritten as the worst issues of the comic have been. Isn't it standard practice to mention the object of the game before jumping right into Step 1, move the Violator? Before I even know why I'm doing anything, I'm treated to a list of steps for each turn, and then a detailed explanation of the rules for each step. It looks really complicated. You're playing cards to the game board to create pages of 8-page stories, rolling dice to determine how far you can move, using chips to add powers to your roll, and moving Violator based on the number of Violator heads you roll. Whenever Violator comes into play, there's a card that does that, and I swear the instructions never explain where you're supposed to put them. This is not a game that required 4 pages of explanation. There are 4 8-page paths connected together on the board. When you get all the way around, back to your own spot, you win the game. You play pages from a story on the board. Once one page is played, only pages from that story can be added to that path. What the stories are is inconsequential. The cards are just shrunken copies of pages from the comic, and you can't read them without a magnifying glass. And by this point, I've read all of these. It's not really worth it. The only information that matters is the number of Spawn icons on a card. That tells you how many you need to roll to land there. If, for example, you roll 4 power and the next 2 spaces cost 2 power each, you move forward 2 spaces. The rule I had to read 18 times before I understood it is about re-rolling. It only seems complicated because the rules don't tell you what the power points are for until after it explains how you get them. It probably would have been more constructive if I'd read the rules backwards. Whether you play a page to the board or you discard something determines how many dice you throw. You get more for pages. If you roll Spawn icons, those count towards your power for the turn. You can re-roll up to the number of Spawn icons you rolled. But if you re-roll and get any Violators, you forfeit all the power you've accumulated and you've got nothing. You also have to remember to move Violator every time a Violator icon comes up, which is irritating, but the game is so monotonous, it was nice to be forced to focus on something I had to do. If Violator lands on you, you go back to the start of that story. There are also special cards that add points to spaces with Overkill, send you forward faster, change how many dice you roll, etc. As I expected, Doomsvent arrived a few hours later, all smiles, ready to challenge me to what he called a thrilling bout. It turns out he had no idea what he was in for. He hadn't read the rules himself, and he sent me the instructions ahead of time so I would have to teach him. The second comic he sent me today was just a misdirection, to lead me to believe all I was to review today were comics about the Spawnmobile. If I hadn't noticed and studied the rules, I would have forfeited the match. As with the Super Nintendo game, there would be a prize if I was victorious and a penalty if I was not. If I defeated Doomsvent, he would finally allow me any single inanimate object to keep in the graveyard for the remainder of Spawn Year. It had to be something I personally owned. Oh God, was he in my real house? And it had to be the very first thing that came to mind. Oh God, can he read my thoughts? I instantly concentrated. focusing on a photograph of my wife and son. More than anything else, I wanted to see their faces. And if I lost, my penalty would be losing every spawn item I currently have in the graveyard. The sketch pad, the iPod, the action figures, everything. As sick as I am of Spawn stuff, if I don't have all of that, I'm looking at some gravestones and the corpse of a jacket that hated the very Spawn stuff that wouldn't be here anymore. If he was being honest, his prize was priceless and his penalty sadistic. So once again, I accepted Doomsvince's challenge. We chose our pieces. Spawns were the only selection. Story of my life. Doomsvince chose Medieval Spawn because it has the word evil in it. I really think he thinks that's how you spell it. And I picked Commando Spawn because he looked like he wanted to punch someone in the face, and I can sympathize. He's supposed to hold a gun, but he's appropriately incompetent. We drew our 4 cards and Doomsvince played first because he's younger than me. Little known fact. The game unfolded in as dull a way as possible. Neither of us drew well, and neither of us rolled well. And when a game hinges so much on luck, there's not much to do but wait around and hope yours improves before your opponent's does. There is a small bit of strategy in when to re-roll to increase your power level, when to play extra power chips, and mostly placing cards with higher power requirements for advancement where they'll stall your opponent, and lower cost cards where they'll move you forward faster. But it's also simple and straightforward that there's never more than 1 or 2 possible choices. What made our game especially dull was nearly only drawing cards that couldn't be played to the board because that story wasn't out. Those are just discarded and you throw fewer dice. So even though most of the spaces on the board were costing 2 power, or when we placed covers, no power at all, the odds of rolling more than 1 or 2 Spawn icons was low enough we were looking about as in a hurry to get anything done as Spawn himself. This is how it should have been in the comics. It costs Spawn energy just to walk forward. That's why he so rarely accomplishes anything. We were neck and neck through the first quarter, but trust me, this was no horse race. Play a card, roll, get a 2 or 3, move forward 1 space, repeat. Sometimes one of us would get a special card or waste an energy chip and get a little further. Doomsvince was livid when Violator came out and caught up to him, putting him 4 or 5 spaces behind, and I got the feeling he was already frustrated that this wasn't the epic battle he had anticipated. As the monotony wore on, he began drifting off, and I had to get his attention and remind him to take his turn several times. About 45 minutes in, he started losing on purpose, just to get the thing over with, missing opportunities to advance or set me back intentionally as I pulled ahead and inched closer to the finish line. I had had enough myself. Nothing was more torturous than the sheer mediocrity of this quick cash-in piece of merchandising. There wasn't even much care from Pressman put into the design, reprinting comic pages for cards, non-painted figures, but I didn't care. So far, Spawn Year has been a series of humiliating defeat after humiliating defeat. Even when I thought I'd won, I always lost. This is Doomsvince's game room, and the cards have been stacked against me from the beginning. But this time, Doomsvince didn't count on getting caught in the web of missed opportunities and poor planning that makes up so much of the world of Spawn, its strands stretching all the way to this ill-considered board game. I was ready for the potential suckage. I fought through the boredom, and I won this one. Finally, I beat him. Begrudgingly, Doomsvince was obliged to honor the terms of our match. I closed my eyes and concentrated. I didn't think of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Doomsvince had promised me the first thing I owned that came to mind, and when I opened my eyes, I was holding Mountain Dew.
I am Doomsvince, and this is day 100 of Spawn Year. How is your fortitude, Captain Logan? Are you rethinking my offer?
Today I have achieved an astounding landmark. 100 days of Spawn Year. 100 reviews, 100 Spawn items, and 100 days of being Doomsvince's increasingly agitated plaything. So much has happened to me emotionally since I arrived here. I almost don't feel like the same person. My priorities at home were so backwards. To think, the last thing I said to my wife before the coma was I couldn't spend New Year's Eve with her because I was too busy reviewing Spawn comics. That feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes I really wonder how I'm going to get through another 9 months of this. I wish I knew yoga or some ancient meditation technique or something. I really have tried to make the best of it. I gave these comics the benefit of the doubt and hoped against hope that I'd be entertained enough to make it. And even going forward, I want to like these. It makes my life a whole lot easier. But Doomsvince chose Spawn for a reason, and not just because Al and I are both in our own personal hells. So I breathed a sigh of relief today when the television appeared again, at the prospect of something different, something to distract me from my admittedly violent frustration with the main comics. Then I had a moment of panic. What if this was another video game, another impossible contest I couldn't win, but with a prize I desperately wanted? And then, what if I did win and the prize turned out to be just another sadistic temptation? But then, what if the prize was getting my pen back? Hey, I can't believe I haven't tried that button on the tombstone again. I should have known. But then, with no Doomsvince head, no preamble, the New Line Cinema logo appeared on the screen, and I was pretty sure I knew what this was. The Spawn movie. It has intruded on a lot of the Spawn comics I've been reading lately. I felt its premise looming as strongly as Doomsvince's, and now I finally had the chance to see what all the retconning's about. It's been an eternity since I've had the privilege of kicking back and allowing myself to be whisked away into a fantastic escape via the magic of the movies, so even knowing it was Spawn, I couldn't help but be a little excited. Though there wasn't much kicking back since I'm still sitting on the ground. Both my feet took turns falling asleep, and my neck popped about a dozen times, and there wasn't any popcorn. Doomsvince did send a refreshments table, but it was nothing but popsicles and Mountain Dew. I doubt I would have liked this movie all that much if I hadn't just spent 3 months reading the source material. The plotting is really convoluted, the characters are all one-dimensional stereotypes, the villain is obnoxious and disgusting and takes up far too much screen time, the other villain is incredibly slow on the uptake, and frankly so is the hero, and what story there is just a loose framework to make giant special effects scenes happen. Visuals over story, stock characters, nonsensical storytelling. This all seems a little familiar. Oh yeah, this is Spawn! The very first thing I noticed is how condensed down everything is from the comics and how refreshing that is. A lot of the mythos in this movie is given in the book over 66 issues. Some of it is as recent as the one I just reviewed. That reveal that the alleys are a holy place is in the movie, because the movie has so much to get done in an hour and a half, which strikes me as awfully short. It can't afford to spend most of its time showing Spawn brooding and whining and dropping little crumbs of information when it darn well feels like it. So unlike the comic, it's mercifully straightforward. If there was more to the comic's mysterious nature, it would be a shame to lose all the amnesia stuff, but that was only ever there to stretch the narrative and be melodramatic, so linear is the way to go here. Like the comic, the movie tries everything it can to be for everyone, mixing all kinds of elements that just don't go together, and even more so because the slightly shorter and less violent PG-13 version was aimed heavily at kids, according to my laptop. Yeah, there was an attempt to market the premise of a hired gun returning from hell to families. So in the same film where you've got murder, revenge, fart jokes, people on fire, the devil worshippers, Marilyn Manson music, attempted genocide, there's also cute one-liners, cute kids, and Spawn's followed around the whole movie by his dog. Yeah, this is basically the story of a Spawn and his dog, and because it's marketed that way, the whole thing turns out to be less of a power struggle between heaven and hell for Al's soul, especially since heaven's side has zero representation beyond Cagliostro, who seems to be more of a rogue, and more of a typical tragic superhero origin story, where hell is just the necessary device to give the hero superpowers so he can stop the big threat to the whole planet. But while it's also obvious, predictable, and silly, it's also leaps and bounds more entertaining than the comic usually is, because it doesn't take itself too seriously. The movie is ridiculous, and it's perfectly comfortable with that. Weirdly, all of the Hollywooding done to make this movie more acceptable to general audience helps immensely. Everyone's forced to have clearer motivations because there isn't time for all that pointless posturing. So when in Clown are in league to have Al murdered from the beginning, Clown is actually Spawn's guide instead of randomly killing mob bosses for no reason, and Cagliostro isn't even remotely cryptic. Malbolgia's plot to manipulate Al into giving up his soul is truncated into a simple revenge plot. Spawn promises to lead his army in exchange for seeing Wanda again. Then, through Clown, Bulgy tries to get Spawn to murder Wynn. Clown, pretending to help Wynn achieve world domination, convinces Wynn to surgically insert a device that'll set off his devastating virus bomb if he dies. The Heat-16, the same weapon Jessica Priest stole in that Curse of the Spawn arc, and that mission is actually referenced. Not surprising, since Alan McElroy wrote both. If Spawn kills Wynn, Bulgy officially owns his soul, for some reason, and he also really wants the Heat-16 to go off, but we're never told why, until Cog's closing narration when he refers to Malbolgia's plans to destroy the Earth. I thought he was grooming a leader for his army against Heaven. Clown has Wynn under his thumb. Wynn not only has the Heat-16, but we know he's planning to use it and overthrow all the world's governments. He claims he'll only kill everyone who refuses to join him. That's one discriminating virus. So why the 5-year mission to get Al ready, send him back to Earth, and dupe him into setting off a bomb that's already gonna go off? Why does Bulgy need Spawn at all? Oh, to lead his army against Heaven. Okay, I know I've said this before, but isn't Jessica a better candidate for that? Al has a conscience. She doesn't. She's totally evil and Spawn kills her. According to my official Spawn Year wiki, she was supposed to come back as a Spawn later in the film, but that idea was scrapped for time. That's why she's taken out so fast and then never referenced again. But then, does the movie even need her? In this version, Wynn is there when Al gets murdered. Why did McFarlane have to retcon Al's entire comic origin for this? Just have Wynn be the soul killer in this movie. Nice to see him do his own dirty work for once anyway. And then just don't reference Chapel in the comics again. Problem solved. And the way Al's murder is set up is poorly conceived. Clown tells Wynn he wants Al killed. Then right after that, Al conveniently starts wrestling with his conscience, discovering for the very first time ever that Wynn's had him killing innocent people. Al tries to get out of the A6, which gives Wynn an excuse to murder him, but he doesn't even need that because he's already planning to do this, and he murders people all the time. I think it might have been interesting if Al had maybe secretly known he was killing good people but ignored it, not wanting to believe it. Like, if no one tells me it's murder and I'm just following orders, it's not my fault. Then when he went to hell, he would seem to really deserve it, seem to have something to atone for, but also wouldn't seem totally soulless like Priest. Besides, you have to know your boss is a supervillain when his hench chick comes to the office dressed like that every day. Like in the comic, we're told how ruthless and stone cold Al is, but I don't see that on the screen. There's a quick flashback where Wanda says he comes home more dead inside after every mission, and Wynn calls him a borderline psychopath. I see a soldier who thinks he's fighting a covert war to protect America. He's maybe naive, but not the slightest bit out to lunch. We don't even see that he likes killing. He tries to jump ship at the first sign of moral ambiguity. The movie wants Spawn to be our superhero, and it's not willing to let him really be bad enough to be chosen by hell in the first place. What completely blindsided me is that the movie gets the most important thing right. Spawn is actually generally likable. It still takes a kid and a dog, but not being physically ripped apart the whole time. He does have that blind thirst for revenge against Wynn, and nearly kills him at the end, knowing he'll set off the virus, and he doesn't care because he thinks Wanda's dead. By the way, Clown should have just killed Wanda. That would have made a great deal more sense than pretending to be her. But that just seems out of character. Again, we're told he's capable of enormous evil, but he never previously seems to have that in him. This Spawn learns from his mistakes. He nearly kills Zack's father for beating him in the alley, then realizes how much worse he'd be making life for that kid, and he never does anything like that again. In the last scene, he sees how he'd be wrecking a family if he pursued Wanda, so he leaves Terry and Wanda alone. And he even has more personality than he does in the comic. He takes a little joy and pride in learning about his powers, and he's not embracing the evil, just enjoying what little there is to enjoy about his awful new existence. I like it when he calls Cog Yoda. And while he's too easily manipulated by Clown, and so is Wynn, Clown's not exactly subtle about his double cross, His revenge motive at least keeps him proactive. He has to learn to turn his energies to something more productive by the end. Unfortunately, we'd need another movie to see just what that would be, but at least he doesn't mope around in an alley all movie and fight random monsters that show up. I like that he only uses guns when he couldn't possibly know what his powers are, and that once he learns, he puts the guns away. He's still too powerful. We're told he'll die if he drains his powers or if his head gets cut off, but when Clown dies at the end, he just goes back to hell, so we don't really know what the stakes are. If he went back to hell, couldn't he just get sent right back? And he electrocutes Bulgy's entire army to death at the end without dying. How lazy is that in your third act? Bulgy, bring me his head. Spawn, well, you kinda gave me enough power to do anything I feel like, so that's not gonna work. We get nothing but the most basic and superficial relationship background for Al and Wanda. I'll love you forever. You'll never lose me. So it's hard to appreciate Al's returning from hell for her. So then, just like the comic, Clown says very little that makes me laugh, but he's right off the page. John Leguizamo really sells it, and he's obviously having a good time. In fact, the whole cast is enjoying the melodramatic, silly material, and it's kind of fun. Some of the effects don't hold up well, particularly the bad color matching of Violator and Hell toward the end, but I love the landscape of Hell itself. The costume looks believable, and the CG cape, when we do see it, is gigantic and really pretty. The comics are stretching to an absurd degree, a premise that doesn't feel designed for an ongoing comic with no foreseeable end. In the film, Cog says Al's most important test is giving up on his old life and moving on. He hasn't done that in 4 years of continuity. He does it here in an hour and a half, and I like him better. I have to admit that as contrived and convoluted as it was, it's nothing compared to the source material, and I actually enjoyed myself. Though I doubt I'll ever feel the need to sit down and... What's going on? Doomsvince? Wait, I have to watch it again? Wait, how many times?
I am Captain Logan, and this is day 250 of Spawn Year. I awoke today to find Tiny Adam West glaring up ominously once again from the trash can. Right away I knew I had a long day ahead of me. Was I in for another round of combat training so soon after the last? What part of my body did he plan on eating away with deadly acidic Coca-Cola this time? But he didn't teleport me anywhere. Instead, he teleported something to me. A television, and hooked up to it one of my very favorite video game consoles, the Sega Dreamcast. Having read several of Terry Fitzgerald's blah 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 articles about the development and release of Spawn in the Demon's Hand, an arcade game released in 1999 by Capcom, I knew precisely what I'd be reviewing today. I wasn't certain I'd ever critique a Spawn item that wasn't a comic book again, but as these games so often were with Doomsvince, playing this video game wasn't only about the review. Frankly, Tiny Adam West has never seemed as concerned with these journal entries as he is with conditioning me into his fully obedient fighting machine, and I'm not sure he even reads them. To that end, learning and practicing this game is part of my combat training, a way to keep my mind on strategy, tactics, and above all, unconventional and supernatural fighting techniques. He left me and told me to practice for a couple hours, instructing me to familiarize myself with the controls and gameplay, and upon his return, he planned to challenge me to a battle royal match. If I managed to defeat him, my reward would be the secret to healing the wound in my chest, which I still haven't managed to fix with my powers. If I lost, I would have to live with this painful and embarrassing hole until next we met. I was determined to get as good as possible at this game before he returned. Nothing makes me feel more like the most pathetic version of Spawn than sitting helpless in an alleyway with a gaping chasm in my midsection. Before I even got to the character select screen, I immediately had the impression that this was the single most frantic, energetic, high-octane, over-the-top, unabashedly preposterous Spawn product I would ever consume. There's a TV cartoon-esque intro, like a lot of arcade fighters have, that makes Spawn look, well, exciting. It's vibrant and frantic, and the backdrop is all dark, demonic, gothic imagery, but that's all just an aesthetic encasing an otherwise outlandish and fun slash fest. And once I started playing, that's exactly what I got. No overbearing, self-important story, despite McFarlane being credited for story at the beginning. No pretending like this is high art or deep philosophy. This is, hands down, the most totally spot-on Spawn experience I've had. It says, look at this insane cast of characters. Angels with no clothes on, demons with lower jaws 4 times longer than their upper jaws, cyborg gorillas, cyborg hitmen, an old guy in a sombrero, a Laurel and Hardy cop duo, and the lead singer of every death metal band ever. How about we not take ourselves too seriously? The edgy but hilariously awesome tone is set at the startup screen with the announcer voice. Spawn. I like how he sounds totally evil, but he provides you with words of encouragement. You died, but it is not the end. Yeah, you got your torso brutally ripped off, but just pick yourself up and start violently eviscerating everybody some more. Several seconds left, you can do it! All these sorts of games have you respawn, see what I did there, repeatedly until the match is done. But this one's based on source material that provides a story explanation. Heaven and Hell can reconstitute anybody they want. The game is simple and straightforward. Pick your character, get tossed in an arena, kill the other players, and die as infrequently as possible. Pick up standard power-ups to help you out. Whoever racks up the most points before the time is out wins. I like that it's not just a point per kill. As far as I can gather, you get more points based on how much of the kill is yours, and on the brutality of the kill. You score anywhere from 1 to 4 points for each character you take out, and you're docked points if you accidentally take yourself out, like jumping in a pit of fire or shooting a bazooka too close to a wall. At the start, you have 12 playable characters to choose from, but there are 37 total, which can be unlocked by playing boss attack mode with each character, and others by beating that mode on multiplayer. So far, I've unlocked some angel named Soleil and Hellspawn. I've got a long way to go. Happily, the game avoids redundancy with several different modes and by pitting you up against a lot of characters you haven't unlocked yet, in tournament mode and boss attack mode. There are a fair number of arenas to choose from, and I like the variety of sizes and different kinds of terrain, from wide open outdoor locales to small enclosed amphitheaters and laboratories. With the enormous cast of characters, though, I do think the game could use another 5 or 10 environments. There's a back alley and a sewer, but a city street would have been appropriate, and these stage names aren't especially creative. Wasteland. Path to Wasteland. Oh, is that hell? Because this is another video game where you have to avoid the word hell? No, the main hell level is called Unknown. That's not unknown, that's hell. The game is rated mature, but it's a really tame mature. Or maybe I've just read so much Spawn now I'm totally desensitized to all this blood and decapitation. Not only is it avoiding the word hell, except for when you unlock Hellspawn, but nobody swears as far as I've heard, and you have to turn up the violence level if you want to see red blood. On the lowest setting, everybody bleeds green, which I guess is somehow less violent and more kid-friendly. I didn't even realize you could change that until just before I began this entry, and thought it was weird that no matter what sort of being you are, you bleed green. Once you turn up the difficulty, you find the game designers were impressively faithful to the source material. On the highest violence level, creatures from hell still bleed necroplasm, while everybody else bleeds red. And it takes advantage of all the various abilities these different characters have in the comics, which does cause some imbalance, particularly when pitting characters with ranged weapons against characters with only melee weapons. But really, characters like Sam and Twitch shouldn't be evenly matched when going up against demons from hell. Sure, Spawn, Sam, and Twitch have to stop to reload, so if you're caught in their crossfire, you have a moment to escape. But since these weapons lock automatically, and a player only has to turn in your general direction to lock onto you, the only way to sneak up on an exclusively gun-toting character is when they're distracted while firing on somebody else. It can be a really awkward mechanic. You don't usually put close combat and projectile shooting characters together in an arcade-style fighter, even in an arena-style game. This is like crossing Soul Calibur with Quake, incidentally, both of which I also had on Dreamcast. I tend to use melee characters though, like Redeemer or Grace the Angel, someone with a long reaching sword, because it's more satisfying than standing behind rocks or pillars sniping people, and because generally it takes less time to make a kill than firing a machine gun. So the game does a decent job of giving pros and cons to each style of fighting. I love that Overkill has his Cyclopean eye beam, though once again, no head firing action. And Tremor's special move is that springy arm thing, which is surprisingly effective. It's disappointing that Spawn only fires guns, but there are other versions that do other things, which can be unlocked, including Dark Ages Spawn, though he looks more like Medieval Spawn. But I guess McFarlane lost the rights to him by this point along with Angela, so that's a bit of a cheat. I kinda wish it was just a full-on Covenant design. And it goes without saying, but Angela isn't here either, replaced with a host of other angels. The initial character select is lopsided, but most of the characters you'd want are here. There are too many shooters and not enough melee characters. Why not include a Spawn with a chain attack, energy balls, or a broadsword if you're also going to open with Al Simmons as playable? Cog is really unique. He shoots energy balls and lightning like Emperor Palpatine, and is surprisingly powerful and usable. Sam and Twitch are both there from the beginning, but Twitch naturally is 3 times more useful. He's fast, hard to see, and has powerful guns. Sam is hilarious. He has a rocket launcher to make up for his lumbering, slow pace, and it takes him forever to get anywhere. But seeing him run twice normal speed when you get the speed up power up is worth picking him once. You get Tremor, but not Sidor. He's unlockable. And 2 angels? Why? They're practically identical. Clown is neat in principle, but clumsy in execution. He's slow and cumbersome like Sam, but has hysterical weapons, including a chainsaw and a boxing glove, and he is theoretically more powerful when you turn into Violator. That move requires pressing right, left, and B simultaneously and is sometimes difficult to pull off. There you're faster, huge, can swipe things with your giant monster arms, and your weapons become 3 types of flame you can breathe. The trouble is, it's a little hard to aim the fire, and you're only Violator for about 30 seconds at a time. I guess Clown isn't great at concentrating. So I don't like playing as him, but it's just fun the game included that transforming mechanic. It would have been easy to program a lot of identical models with different skins, and while some characters are naturally too redundant, it doesn't skimp out on having the most unique of them perform their signature moves. It's also fun that Clown's name changes to Violator on the scoreboard when he transforms. You also get Jessica Priest at the start, another shooter, and I don't know why she's dressed like a cop, and I'm a little surprised not to see Jason win anywhere. And then there's the characters that seem to be just made up for the game. I've read 129 issues of Spawn, all of Sam and Twitch, all of Curse of the Spawn, just shy of a dozen minis and one-shots. Who the heck is Brimstone? He looks like a guy who'd show up in a Spawn comic, but I've never seen him before. We've got the entire cast of the Violator mini. Yeah, all 4 Flabeic brothers. Violator, Vindicator, Vacillator, and Vaporizer. And boy, does he ever vaporize. That stuff is brutal. I wonder if they have a cousin called Moisturizer who just sprays deadly lotion all over you. Or Vacuuminator who just sucks you into himself. Oh wait, that's something else. Vacuuminator is one of my old YouTube subscribers. Wonder how that guy's doing. Even the Admonisher is here, which is weird, because he doesn't say anything. So if we're digging that deep, why do we need to make people up for this? I'm not suggesting Wanda or Granny Blake or Cyan or Billy Kincaid driving an ice cream truck or Little Old Lady God or Todd McFarlane, although that could be fun and cathartic. But where's the freak? Why not John Sangster? Why doesn't anybody remember Suture, the only cool original thing in Curse of the Spawn? Anyway, onto the gameplay. There's not much to it. You jump, attack, and cycle through weapons. Some characters have a special move which you perform with the right trigger, and there's a button to adjust camera angle which switches your perspective toward whatever you're fighting or whatever's currently beating the tar or necroplasm out of you. The camera and lack of control over perspective are the game's biggest limitations. You can toggle the camera to a distant perspective in the options, but it's still hard to see what you're doing sometimes. There are occasional glitches, sometimes foreground objects get in the way. For the most part, the real hindrance is in the controller. If only there was a second stick, so you'd have a full 365-degree range of vision, vital for a third-person 3D game like this. According to Fitzgerald, a port to the PS2 was planned, but it never happened because it would have had to be rebuilt from the ground up, as the coding was transferable to a Sega platform but not to a Sony system. But you know, the first stick would be nice too. Why do I have to use the D-pad? How is a game ported from an arcade system with joysticks to a home console with an analog stick and you can't use it? If there's one kind of game you want to be able to use the stick with, it's one where your character moves in all directions. There are other irritations too. Sometimes there's so much chaos on the screen you can't begin to strategize a means of attack or escape. Sometimes characters blend in too much with the landscape so you can't see them. Sometimes I'll come up on a character that's already been killed, but they haven't respawned yet, so I'm hacking away at a standing corpse. Either fall down or disappear already. Yeah, maybe you're only a torso with blood flying out the top, but if there's so much mayhem, I can't always tell. And in the outdoor stages, sometimes you'll come to the edge of a perimeter and get blocked, but it looks like it just keeps going. Maybe put up a barricade, body of water, something. But if you can live with all of that, the game has a lot of replay value, and modes for the lacking in attention span or completist alike. You can play single matches alone or with 3 other players, free-for-all or cooperative with teams of 2. And there's a one-player tournament mode, complete several stages against 3 appropriately allied CPUs. Or my favorite, Boss Attack, where it's you against one CPU with a health bar plus minions. In platformers, I usually despise bosses. SNES Redeemer still gives me nightmares. Oh, the mannequins. Oh god, not the mannequins. But now I get to be Redeemer. But it's nice in a game like this to have one major target to focus on. After I'd played for a good long time alone, Tiny Atom West returned, with a controller in hand, and we had a duel. Well, plus 2 CPUs. You can't just have 2 players on screen, which is a little annoying. You have to choose 2 computer players as well. Tiny Atom West chose Clown, naturally, and he insisted I play as Spawn. Great. Shooting. He made the CPUs Cog and Redeemer. He probably knows Captain Cogliostro and I aren't exactly friends, though I'm not sure what the significance of Redeemer is, except that I almost had a heart attack trying to beat him on Super Nintendo. In the end, my intense training paid off. I won by a hair, 19 to 18. Tiny Atom West was delighted at my progress, and he produced a 2-liter of Mountain Dew, revealing that the only way to seal a coke-induced wound is to pour Mountain Dew around it. It can't be done with supernatural powers. I downed the rest of the bottle after healing my midsection, and felt my power levels max out. I was stronger than I've ever felt in this place. Before he left, Tiny Atom West reminded me to continue practicing my fighting strategy with this game, but he also suggested that now might be a good time to work on my creativity, to stretch my powers and see what else I can do. And now, dear reader, I feel like celebrating. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 300 of Spawn Year. For the third time this year, I find myself reviewing a kind of subject I have never in my career reviewed before. It's kind of a shame no one will ever read these journals. As dull and stagnated as I've so often felt, being forced to critique nothing but Spawn day in and day out, I've also simultaneously been forced to stretch my proverbial reviewing wings. I've now reviewed a board game, a set of trading cards, and after today, I will have reviewed a documentary. The game and cards were both intimidating because they were outside my usual wheelhouse. I'm used to writing about straightforward fictional narrative, and these other entertainment mediums have to be judged on their own entirely different set of criteria, which I'm less familiar with and feel far less qualified to comment on. Although after so many Spawn comics, I think I can call myself a veteran in reviewing not so straightforward narrative. And I found that no matter what it is, game, movie, whatever, any self-contained standalone piece is an absolute breath of fresh air after trying to keep so much sordid continuity straight in my head. Still, a documentary is a very different animal from anything I've tackled. It's still a story of sorts, but a work of non-fiction about a real person, and most importantly, a person who has greatly affected me personally with his work. The challenge today is to write about essentially a 70-minute film biography about a man whom I have myriad preconceived notions about. It is impossible for me to look at this piece or this man completely objectively. Then again, I can't do that with his fiction either. Any Spawn comic I review is now from the lens of a reader who has experienced the rest under certain conditions. His strong opinions about what's come before, has uncontrollable expectations about what's to come, and try as I might to be fair and constructive, all of that creates personal bias which no doubt affects me at a subconscious level. And that bias hasn't gotten me buried alive yet, so I guess impartiality isn't a prerequisite for getting through Spawn Year. Todd McFarlane, The Devil You Know, directed by Kenton Vaughn, spends much of its time in McFarlane's corporate office. We see a lot of his business life circa 2000, and we get a lot of his life story in his own words. The film focuses primarily on McFarlane's love of sports and his failure to become a Major League Baseball player, then his breaking into comics as a writer, his falling out with Marvel over their censoring of his violence in Spider-Man, and the phenomenon that was Spawn afterwards. It's the classic rags to riches story, the tale of a man who had nothing but talent and intuition, and who turned that into an empire. What I like most about the movie is that it isn't a fluff piece. It paints McFarlane as an extraordinary and fascinating person, but it isn't a defense of how he runs his business or of his ego or of the extreme level of violence his comics have so often been criticized for. Certainly McFarlane himself addresses these things, sometimes defending himself, and sometimes outright admitting he's not perfect. But the film's agenda seems to be to get as far into McFarlane's mind as it can and letting the viewer be the judge of what kind of person he is. It allows his parents, his wife, his friends, and colleagues to candidly discuss the man. Nobody seems to be doing much sugarcoating, and McFarlane himself seems very genuine and honest. If the movie has a point to make, it's that Todd McFarlane is a walking contradiction, and that he knows that. He's the creator who hated the corporate establishment, left, was successful because, unfettered by any boss above him, he put his innovative talents to work creating something he loved, and as he puts it, knew a lot of guys would love because at heart, he's just a regular guy. And so he knows if he likes it and it's not out there, a lot of other regular guys might love it too. And then before long, he becomes the establishment, and as he puts it, he turns into that thing he hated most. Interestingly, and I'm surprised no one in the film puts it this way, McFarlane almost makes a deal with the devil to get what he most wants. He could have remained the bold underdog instead of the king of a merchandising juggernaut, but then how could he get his art out there without compromising it? Or maybe a more apt metaphor is he refused to sell his soul to the devil, so instead he had to become the devil. thus the title. And I also really like the title because I do feel like I know him better now. Looking at this in narrative terms, if McFarlane is our protagonist, he's a fully realized, three-dimensional, unique, and compelling one. He is wonderfully complicated, flawed, contradictory, but brilliant in his art and his sense for business and what people enjoy. He seems to have real respect for his fans, trying not to take them for granted because, as he says at a convention, they put food on his table. He's passionate and a ruthless businessman and unabashedly extremely opinionated. He says if the world worked differently, he'd love a part-time job executing criminals who mutilate innocent people. And he's totally arrogant, but I was at times charmed by his arrogance because he often seems to come by it honestly. At his most down-to-earth, toward the end, he talks about how his success and fame have changed him, and he describes it almost like a necessary evil. He wanted to produce art. That takes capital, and if you're really good at it, you can get a lot of capital, and it's hard not to become what you used to fight against in order to get that necessary thing to facilitate your art. Now, is that a cop-out? Is that cynical? I feel like I'd have to achieve that level of fame to really know. But what's compelling, and what makes him a human being, is how hard it seems he fought it, in the pride he takes in still seeing himself as a blue-collar guy, and how he doesn't dress like the upper crust, and how he genuinely doesn't appear, from what we see here, to look down on people with less money than him. And given how he talks to some of his employees when he thinks they're full of BS, he doesn't look like he's putting on much of an act for the camera. One of the details that most surprised me was that it was a full year when McFarlane was getting famous for Spider-Man at Marvel before any of his family realized he was already a millionaire. He didn't want it to change him. And yet, you look at things like the gimmicky incentives, chase figures in his action figure company versus his criticism of variant covers and oversaturation in comics to entice collectors and dilute the market. And by the way, he did some of those covers himself much later, and I don't see a difference. It did change him. But I find him sympathetic because he's clearly really uncomfortable with that. And I had a lot of respect for him, despite his flaws, for allowing that vulnerability to shine through. Maybe my favorite moment is at the end, where he says someday the world will realize he's just an ordinary Canadian who pulled the wool over their eyes all this time, and then we'll all move on. In one huge fundamental element of his personality, I deeply admire Todd McFarlane. He didn't lose his drive or ambition when his first dream didn't pan out. Even when he was first getting rich off of comic books, McFarlane called himself an athlete first and said art was just how he was paying the bills. At the beginning of the movie, he says his biggest dream is to play in the major leagues, and that doesn't change even though he knows he missed the chance and it'll never happen now. He was almost on a Canadian team in the major leagues, was 26th out of 25 in a 25-man team. And when that shot was over, he pursued comics with the same determination and relentlessness he pursued baseball, and discovered he was better at it. Maybe the quote that will most stick with me is when he said, "The artists that inspired me most were the terrible ones." Instead of mimicking or building on the greats, he completely invented his own method based on what he didn't want his work to look like, from the art he didn't like. I was most impressed with McFarlane's refusal to get discouraged by failure, his tenacity, his initiative. And I'm even more baffled by how unmotivated and apathetic he made the protagonist of a story he claims is inspired by his own life. He says, "I can write about my own life a heck of a lot better than anyone else's." He cites very broad, superficial personality traits of Al Simmons as parallels to himself. They both have a bad attitude, they both care about their family more than anyone else, everybody's named after people he knows. Yes, but Todd, you're interesting and Spawn isn't. If Spawn were more like Todd McFarlane, he'd be more driven, snarkier, and a lot more fun. If McFarlane had somehow written more of his own life into the book, it might have been great. That's how you make characters come alive, even in a high-concept fantasy story. And as I've surmised before, those few interlude one-shot stories that were more down-to-earth probably came more from his personal experience, but he kept falling back on murky and generic mythology, and it lost all that. When he gave up his dream of playing baseball for a living and turned toward art, McFarlane was playing toward his strengths. Why couldn't he see he wasn't doing that when he was writing? The way he discusses ownership and creator freedom, I suspect he wrote and plotted so much because he felt in control. Of course, he doesn't talk about his writing failings because, from a business standpoint, they don't matter. The books were a phenomenon, and he probably thought his writing was fine, or at least fine enough, between the success of that and his Spider-Man title. And he probably wrote instead of drew because, as we see in the film, his business concerns eat up most of his day, and I can empathize with his desire to stay creatively involved, even though I think that made the story practically unsalvageable. And I still think that success blinded him to better creative directions, like Morrison's, that he ignored when he should have taken advantage of them. There are a number of things the film either glosses over or skips completely, and at only 70 minutes, I think it could have stood another 20 minutes to paint a fuller picture of McFarlane's history. There is no discussion at all about the creation of Image and the other creators involved. Weird that a McFarlane documentary never even mentions Rob Liefeld. And if you saw this with no prior knowledge, you'd think Spawn was the only book Image published. There's also nothing about anyone McFarlane worked with on Spawn. There's a whole gallery of mostly Capullo covers, but he's never even mentioned. Regarding presentation, I like the simplicity of the film. No overbearing voiceover, no cute transitions, and whenever it needs to present facts, it uses a simple intertitle, and it doesn't have to fall back on that more than a few times. There are maybe more sound effects than are necessary. Sometimes to empathize the questionable violence in Spawn, panels are accompanied by sounds, mostly from the animated series, which is a little distracting, as is some of the odd and quirky synthesized music I may never get out of my head. Given McFarlane's business connections to Kiss and Korn, I was surprised it didn't have more of a rock or metal vibe. The first half sometimes feels a bit disjointed and unfocused, like there's not much rhyme or reason to why you're seeing interview footage in the order you're seeing it in. Once it gets to the development of a Spawn comic, it's far better organized. I'm really glad I saw this movie, and it makes me curious to see what McFarlane is like now, over a decade later. Ironically, seeing the story of McFarlane's career satiated my palate for a thoughtful character study, a thirst rarely quenched during Spawn year. I like that so much of the negative aspects of McFarlane's personality come out here because I'm better able to appreciate the positive and trust what I'm seeing. It's a strange experience to vehemently detest so much of McFarlane's narrative choices, but appreciate him here and even agree with a lot of what he has to say. Todd McFarlane isn't a good writer, but I really believe, given some perspective, if he put his mind to perfecting that craft the way he did his art, the potential is there. McFarlane isn't the devil. He didn't put me in Spawn here. If I weren't here, I could have chosen to stop reading, and the fact that Spawn fell out of popularity may prove that great art isn't enough to keep people's attention when your story doesn't work. I admire Todd McFarlane, despite all the headaches his work has induced, and I'll use his example as I push forward to finish the final 65 days of Spawn here, and not the example of his sluggish and unmotivated creation. Signed, Captain Spawn. On December 31st, 2012, after declining to spend New Year's Eve with my wife on account of my relentless workaholic nature, my greatest vice finally caught up to me, and I slipped into a Mountain Dew-induced sugar coma. Or at least, that's what a very convincing version of my arch-nemesis Doomsvince claimed when he came to me in a surreal, dreamlike version of my office and gave me a sadistic choice. I could either live out the rest of eternity in a purgatory of my own making, or I could pay for all of my selfish deeds by spending an entire year doing what I spent all my time doing, at the expense of all other responsibilities: review comic books. As this was to be my own personal hell, and as Doomsvince was looking for something, quote, brutish and atmospheric, my subject for the entire 365-day duration of my sentence would be none other than Todd McFarlane's Spawn. To add to the mystique and to prove just how much control he somehow had over me, Doomsvince not only transported me to a strange graveyard to spend the next year in, he erased my memory of all Spawn knowledge I ever possessed. If I managed to critique every single item that came out of the open grave Doomsvince forced me to dig myself, handwritten in a quaint and creepy-looking notebook, I would be returned to the living, return to my wife and child at the end of what Doomsvince called Spawn Year. If I failed to finish even one entry, I would be buried alive in that grave for all eternity. There was, of course, no choice at all. I accepted Doomsvince's challenge, unaware of just how treacherous, twisted, and mind-bogglingly bizarre the road ahead was. Each day, a comic book or other Spawn-related item shot up out of the open grave, and each day I diligently wrote the most thorough and well-considered review I could. As far as I knew, this really was a matter of life and death. But it wasn't just the often inconsistent, convoluted, head-scratching, cynical, depressing, self-serious, incoherent storytelling that made it difficult to forge ahead. Doomsvince threw everything at me to lessen my resolve, to make me doubt myself, and to irradiate my whole being with guilt. He teased me and tormented me with innumerable mind games, tricking me into writing with my own blood when there was a button on a tombstone that would have dispensed a pen with a never-ending supply of ink at any time. He created a situation in which I was forced to murder a living, breathing jacket that had a deathly allergic reaction to Spawn memorabilia and would have destroyed my only way out of that place if I hadn't destroyed it first. Whenever I thought I had won, I had really lost somehow. And whenever I knew I had lost, it was always worse than I first thought. Doomsvince repeatedly gave me a sliver of hope and then replaced it with the bleakest of bleak despairs. He enticed me to read Spawn issue 185 when he decided to treat me to a taste of my subterranean accommodations were I to fail at my daily task, when I knew reading ahead was against the rules. I paid for that incursion when I learned that Spawn himself would ultimately prove to be a coward who didn't have it in him to find those things that make his life, such as it is, worth living and carry on. I would have to read about that sort of despicable, entitled, miserable cretin practically every day as temptation after temptation was thrust in my face, inviting me to surrender my own dignity and promise of a better tomorrow in favor of the easy way out. And Doomsvince offered me myriad ways to terminate my suffering early. As Al Simmons was sucked into hell in issue 50 and toured the underworld, I was taken on a tour of my own hell, forced to face Doomsvince as he wore my wife's face, then tempted with the very addiction that ostensibly led me into this awful predicament, and later made to become Mountain Dew itself. And finally I was presented with a copy of my 2-year-old son, and invited to live with him in a deranged fantasy for all time if only I would agree to stop reviewing. As enticing as Doomsvince's offers sometimes were, I resolved to press on, reading and writing about comics, video games, the board game, that infernal, dullest of all dull board games. But eventually my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to venture out to find Doomsvince himself. My instincts told me there was more to all of this than a coma-induced illusion, and if the real Doomsvince were somehow behind it, perhaps I could outsmart him. Up to this point, he had never managed anything more threatening than postal fraud, and after all, anyone who signed his name with the acronym of the Department of Motor Vehicles couldn't be all that menacing. Perhaps he managed the whole thing with mirrors, or holograms, or animatronics. So I walked into the black abyss, and what I discovered was my magnificent game room, a glorious mirage in the pitch desert. But it wasn't a mirage at all. It was the real deal. I could watch my favorite television shows and play the best video games from my childhood. And while I was there for those incredible 18 days, I was in no danger of losing Doomsvince's game, because he allowed me to review the animated series and to stay there in that room. And of course, as he had planned, I became too comfortable, and to quote perhaps the most overused line in Spawn comics, I played right into his hands. Doomsvince wanted to make a point that he was created by a child, that I was juvenile and immature, and that the reason I spent so much of my time reviewing the lowbrow, second-rate childish schlock from my childhood was because I never really grew up. And the person who had most suffered for that irresponsible attitude was Doomsvince. And then he made me beg him to send me back to that horrible graveyard, or I would have to incur the wrath of his zombie-like prototype clones, left over from the earliest experiments that Dan Torrey secretly ran before he finally understood how to effectively create a perfect and intelligent clone of Vincent Haskins. Prior to this, I had never really given Dooms Vince's motivations for his pathetic villainous schemes very much thought. In a radical and, in hindsight, ill-conceived plot of my own, I, several years earlier, enlisted Dan's help in creating a second Vince to help me in keeping up my video output on Geekvolution. Vince was busy pursuing a physical therapy degree, and my time was stretching thinner and thinner as we developed new video series, and our viewership continued to demand further episodes of each of them. Another Vince could fill in for the original on Geeks Not Nerds and other programs, and no one else would ever be the wiser. But Vince 2.0 was different from Vince. He had his own strange ideas about how things should be done and what topics we should be making videos about. In short, this Vince was a pretentious snob who looked down on anything he deemed a lesser art form. I dismissed him as a defective clone, a failed experiment. He walked out angry, and I abandoned the whole venture. Many lame attempts at getting back at me, and Spawn Year seemed to be Dooms Vince's crowning achievement. It was diabolically brilliant. Forced me to face my sins and shortcomings every day for a whole year by reading and writing about a supposed superhero who was the epitome of everything I most despised. Spawn Year was designed to break my spirit, to make me hate myself and my craft, and it came very close to doing precisely that. After several months, I began to fear I was legitimately losing my mind when I began talking regularly to a Violator action figure, who acted as my therapist but poisoned my mind with notions of drinking Mountain Dew and giving into the vice that brought me there. And then came Malbolgia, who told me the only way out was through suicide, the Al Simmons way. And then the most disturbing of all, Chipmunk Jason Wynn, who didn't care what I did so long as I stopped sulking and mulling about and finally did something. And so, hoping to silence those voices, wanting to find some way out, desperate and reeling, I went my own way, and I murdered Dooms Vince. I stabbed him over and over again, and that was it. The reality didn't shatter around me, the curtain never rose, but Dooms Vince was dead, and he couldn't taunt me anymore. Which should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Because now, there was nothing. The comics still came, but I had no idea why. I had no idea what the impetus was behind the whole operation. And if there was no Dooms Vince, how did I know I wouldn't be at this forever? At this point, I understood nothing. Had I killed the real Dooms Vince? Was all of this actually in my head from the very start? And who was I now that I had gone from killing in self-defense to stone-cold premeditated murder? All I knew was that my mind was slipping, and I craved Mountain Dew like I had never craved anything before. So I took that 2-liter I'd won in that infernal board game all those weeks before, and I downed the entire bottle. And that's when Spawn Year became something quite different. I found myself in what I could only describe as a second sugar coma, assuming a coma was really what had happened to me in the first place, and as I write this, I still can't be completely certain where I've been all these months, if it's really been only months. Though at the time I had, like Al Simmons, suffered almost complete amnesia, except for the Spawn comics I'd read thus far. It was incredibly selective. Now, instead of a graveyard, I found myself in an alley with a trash can that contained the items for review each day and a throne made aptly of Mountain Dew and comic book long boxes. And my face and hands had transformed into those of a hellspawn. As I continued doing the only thing I knew how to do at that point, critique Spawn comics, I learned more about this new surreality I was in, and my memory slowly returned to me. My veins were now coursing with Mountain Dew, and I needed the stuff to survive. Perhaps that's my penance for giving in to my horrible hunger pains. Without a steady supply of Mountain Dew, I would descend into a slow madness and degenerate into the most violent convulsions imaginable. And the more Mountain Dew I drank, the more my costume began to form. A symbiote, just like Al Simmons, and now it is gestated into its complete form. Taking Dooms Vince's place as my tormentor is the sadistic Tiny Adam West, whose bite is certainly worse than his bark. He's grooming me for some epic showdown with his arch nemesis, the emissary of Coke, whoever that is, making me train with his obnoxious lieutenant, stocky Frank Miller Batman. And I have no choice but to do exactly what I'm told in training for this big fight if I want to keep my sanity. Conditioning through addiction. The comics continue to come each day, and I continue writing about them, but Tiny Adam West doesn't seem particularly concerned with whether or not I review them. In fact, he used to create terrible situations to make it more difficult to review on time, just because he knew I thought it was important, and it was something else he could use to control me. Now he doesn't need to do such a thing. There is apparently some kind of epic rivalry between Coke and Pepsi, which are actually not just corporations, but really cosmic entities vying for control of the world or the universe or whatever. I don't know, nor do I really care about the details. I, of course, don't buy into any of it. I think I'm still in the same Spawn year, whatever it always was, just with different set dressing. I don't think the rules ever changed. I think I'm still supposed to review these Spawn comics every day, and I think that in 2 days, if I have reviewed everything presented to me, I will return home. I don't know if I somehow killed the real Doomsvents, but my instincts tell me there's still more to this than just an illusion concocted by my own subconscious. I've gotten messages from Dan Torrey through newspaper and a Magic 8 skull imploring me to never stop reviewing. My gut tells me that if there's anything real at all in this place, it's those messages. There have been other players in the alleyway as well, and according to one of them, Captain Cogliostro, they're each a representation of some part of my mind, trying to tell me something. Captain Cog claimed that he was the rational part of my mind, telling me the only thing keeping me in this place is me, and that if I only stopped reading these comics, I would wake up and return to my life instantly. If that was true, I have now passed the point of no return. The same day I reviewed the dreaded Spawn number 185, in which Al Simmons commits suicide, Captain Cog gave me the opportunity to do the same, handing me a gun with a single silver-laden bullet, and claiming that he was dying, that my rational mind had almost completely slipped away, and that ending it all here was my only chance at saving my last sliver of sanity and returning home. Instead, I put the dying curmudgeon out of his misery and moved on. Then there's Freakadoo, ostensibly the personification of my eventual madness, the nut job I'll become if I continue on the path I'm on. He decided to live with me after I murdered Captain Cog, and there was no getting rid of him. Now that the alleged personification of my reason was dead, the alleged personification of my madness was indestructible. As hard as Spawn Year was working to make me believe I was losing touch with reality and that everything I've experienced is an existential crisis, I became certain that this was all still Doomsvince's doing when I reviewed Spawn 199. And conveniently, the freak turned out to be Malbolgia, who was supposed to be dead, just like Doomsvince, and at the hands of Spawn, just as Doomsvince died at my hands. I made the mistake of including my hypothesis in a journal entry that Freakadoo must be Doomsvince, and that all my suspicions were confirmed. But the next day, Tiny Adam West, who Captain Cog claimed represented my guilt, killed Freakadoo and told me to focus on my training. It seems Freakadoo was immune to everything except the personification of my guilt. If Captain Cog was right, my guilt has completely taken over. If I'm right, Spawn Year is desperately trying to confuse me to the point of real madness, so I won't be able to fulfill my part of the original agreement. All I know is that I made things hardest for myself when I deviated from that agreement. I've made my bed, and all I can do is lie in it and hope it'll let me get out of it when this nightmare is finally over. I know that trying to take shortcuts is what created Doomsvince in the first place, and trying to take another one when he walked out was the worst mistake I have ever made. I know I don't want to give up like Al Simmons has time and time again, and I know I don't want to keep making the same mistakes like he does over and over and over. I know I'm sick of lackluster and disturbingly bad comic books, and I know there's something suspiciously MST3K about this entire situation, but I want to go home. I want to fix the things that are wrong with my life. I've embraced my identity as Captain Spawn, and sometime in the next 2 days, I will fight the emissary of Coke, and I will do everything I can to win if that's what I must do to finish this whole thing. That's why when the Coke Angel, the mother of what will be the immaculately conceived Redeemer of Coke, offered me the chance to change sides and live with her in eternal bliss, giving me the gift of the wings of refreshment, I turned her down. No matter what happens, I'm not changing a thing. Let's see what happens when I dot that last I, cross that last T, and write the letters CS for the final time. I am Captain Spawn. Tomorrow is day 364 of Spawn Year.
Slap yourself in the face. Slap yourself in the face. Slap yourself in the face. Slap yourself in the face.
I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 364 of Spawn Year. Today, Spawn Year tried to throw me one more desperate, weak curveball by giving me 2 issues to review at once. It's irregular, but not totally unprecedented. There was that day I reviewed all his action figure comics. Maybe the hope was that I'd review 218 and I wouldn't notice 219 on the other side of the bag. That's not totally playing fair, but when has Spawn Year ever done that? If you interpret Doomsvince's original rule, one Spawn item each day, as whatever's packaged inside a Mylar bag, this counts as one item. Not a very clever trick when I'm this close. I am ready for anything. Then again, it's also possible somebody messed up the count when they chose the items for review and are just bad at math. 218 and 219 chronicle an epic, thrilling fight between Spawn and Malbolgia, as each tries to gauge the other's powers and abilities and get to the other psychologically. I figured the last couple days would produce the most agonizingly hard-to-finish Drek in Spawn Year, but these two issues are nothing short of exciting. I'll even go so far as to say imaginative. Just like during the Armageddon days, I'm mostly praising it for looking amazing and not being boring. The actual story is ridiculous and nearly impossible to take seriously, though certainly less cryptic and nonsensical than Hogwin's stuff. Somehow these issues feel a little more self-aware than usual, melodrama that kinda knows it's melodrama instead of playing at sophistication, though I don't expect that to last. And maybe all the sudden action is giving it that vibe unintentionally. Once Malbolgia and Jim start testing each other's powers in the dead zone, things start to really pick up, but before that, we get a pointless chase throughout various shadowy areas all over the world as Clown and Spawn try to elude Malbolgia long enough to come up with a plan, because like the every creepy animal on Earth is a being of pure evil thing, shadows are portals that creatures of darkness can use to teleport anywhere. Everything is so literal in this book. I wonder how these first-grade logic explanations work along with, science. Jim's ready to fight Malbolgia right there in the building where all his friends are above him, and it's Clown who has to remind him that he might get everyone he cares about killed. But Jim seems to think it's more important to show Bolgia he's not afraid than to keep his friends safe. I know Clown's still pretending to be Jim's friend here, but even with what he's told Jim that's actually true, like his killing thousands of humans without remorse and his ambition to lord over hell, he has no reason to feign concern about Mark and Susan. Even Clown seems genuinely disturbed that Jim is this heartless. A couple issues ago, I would assume it's the costume's influence, but now I know this is a guy who, with his memories, murdered the woman he claimed to love just for research that had no guarantee of solving his super soldier problem. I'm pretty sure this guy would set a man on fire for an ice cream cone. Clown convinces Jim that Bolgia trying to force a fight here is a trap, and reminds him that Bolgia is still missing a piece and isn't at full power yet, so it's smarter to deal with him on their terms. Malbolgia chases them through the shadows all over Tarnation, like the climactic chase in Monsters Incorporated, and using the same goofy cartoon logic. They even teleport right next to a rack of Haunt comics. I wonder if there's an entertainment product in this universe that isn't somehow associated with or owned by Image Comics. I imagine every regular, everyday Joe listens to Kiss and Korn, plays with McFarlane action figures, and watches nothing but baseball and hockey. I wouldn't be surprised if the main fast food chains in this universe are Walking Dead Burger and Savage Taco Dragon. Oh wait, maybe we've got food covered. Let's not forget Texas Pete's Taco and Waffle House and the Angry Bovine. So Clown tells Jim to keep shifting from place to place to keep Malbolgia off his trail for 20 minutes, without explaining where he's going. Lucky for Clown, Bolgia keeps following Jim, and like an idiot, Jim just stands there wondering where he went, even though Clown just told him Bolgia would find him if he stayed in one place. Just once, could I get really likable but dumb as bricks? Or completely deplorable but a tactical genius? I don't even need smart and feeling something every now and again. Just give me one time. Clown goes to retrieve the power piece he planted on Sam. Is there some reason Malbolgia might guess that's where it is now, when he's been stumped by it all this time? Isn't Clown taking a giant risk going there and leading Malbolgia to it? and since he left Bulgy a note letting him know he took the thing, shouldn't Clown be worried that Malbolgia might be trying to spring a trap for him to lead him there and that he's less concerned with Jim? Well, lucky for Clown, Malbolgia doesn't manage to find him right away and instead takes Jim to the dead zone in the alleys. He uses the Spawn powers against Jim, saying he created Spawn and controls its powers, and for once, I feel like Jim might be in real trouble. I don't really care, since he was willing to kill all his friends for no reason a few pages ago, but at least I can't immediately guess what's going to happen. Bulgy explains the weird, arbitrary rules about dead zones. God and Hell get to place each other's pieces in any dead zone on Earth when a demon or angel is deployed, and those creatures have no power until they leave the zone. Mr. McFarlane, I think you've forgotten that you're plotting a comic book and not an arcade melee fighter, although, speaking from experience, this material really does translate better to one of those. Jim says Bulgy must be scared, and that's why he needs Jim stripped of his powers. He's trying to look powerful and make Jim think he controls him, but really, it's all a fancy light show to intimidate him. Now Bulgy tries to prove his power, but finally we discover that there really is much more to Jim than the Spawn costume. We discover that he doesn't even need the costume because he has a power buried deep that goes beyond Spawn, as he demonstrates when he unfurls the wings of redemption. And that's the exciting cliffhanger in 218. I really wish we'd stop calling them that. No one who's worn these things so far has been any more redeemed than the wings of refreshment have quenched my thirst. I don't care how many times the book pretends Jim's only motivation here is the selfless and noble goal of saving the world from Bulgy's reign. He's out for himself, period. Unless he's suddenly a decent guy because he's just as mind-controlled by the wings as he is by the Spawn costume. 219 is mostly a brutal but breathtaking fight that also manages to explain a lot about why the heck Jim is so cosmically special. Everything comes together here, sort of. And it's tying Wanda giving birth to toddler God and Satan as the most out there story element in Spawn thus far. The gist of it all is that while Jim was in his coma, his soul, which as near as I can figure it used to be an angel that was ejected from heaven, left his body and tried to murder God, which was impossible because these cosmic entities never really die. Well then, I don't know why anyone's surprised to see Malbolgia back from the dead. So Bulgy scattered his power in 7 different places back then, afraid Jim's soul might try to kill him too, though I don't know why he was worried if he can't die. And there's this confusing bit in Bulgy's story about Jim making eye contact with the soul of Al Simmons. Souls have eyes? Okay, I guess that's just in there so he'll know about Al when Al commits suicide, maybe? That apparently happened when God gave Hell Jim's soul for 1,000 of his souls back. No idea why this fallen angel was given to a person as a human soul, or if it was in Jim while he was a mad scientist, and my head is throbbing just trying to process all this. But it at least helps explain, 1, why Jim is so much more powerful than Al was, 2, why he keeps healing people, and 3, why the costume was bonded to him. Letha apparently chose him because she thinks he holds the key to getting into heaven and thinks she really can kill God with the combined power of an angel and a Spawn. Finally, the costume is its own character, and it's fun that it wants to rule the universe all by its lonesome. After putting up with Al all those years, I am almost rooting for her. I really can't believe there's an actual explanation for how the symbiote got so powerful. I mean, it's hokey and bizarre, but I am astonished that it was ever paid off. But I sort of wish I could have read 187, skipped to 216, and then just read this. The final page with the Spawn costume declaring war on everything and everyone just after Darth mollifying Malbolgia is some of Kurdansky's best work. It's beautifully detailed, gothic, and haunting, and I'm actually a little curious to see what happens next, if only to find out if things can possibly get more convoluted and preposterous. Oddly, I identify most with Malbolgia here, the master who can't control his creation and whose creation believes has surpassed him. But Bulgy is still trying to exert that control, and all I want is to go home. Signed, Captain Spawn.
Captain Spawn, the time is nigh. The emissary of Coke awaits you. I will give you one more opportunity to join me in my holy war against the denizens of Pepsi and Mountain Dew. The wings of refreshment are the apparatus by which you may transform yourself into a being of pure Coke. When you flap your wings continuously and without pause, you will replace your entire supply of Mountain Dew with Coca-Cola and be forever transformed. It is a long and painful process, but be assured, it will not kill you. You will be cleansed of all evil.
I'll do my own cleansing, thank you very much. Tomorrow, when I'm back in my own house, I'm gonna need a really, really long shower.
Then you are not worthy of the wings of refreshment. You have committed yourself to evil and thus sealed your fate. Enter the arena. I shall pray to my Redeemer to give you a swift and honorable death.
Wow, how Nightmare Before Christmas can you get? This is the comic shop from hell. And here comes the owner. So, you're the emissary of Coke. What are you, 3 days old? Oh, yep, there's your bottle. Oh, that's for me, isn't it? All that celebrating is a little premature, don't you think? You know, if you wanted a real challenge, you'd review some of these Spawn comics. Alright, let's do this thing. That's dirty pool. Oh, what the? Ah! All right, second win. Ha! Ah! 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 Come on. Get up. Come on. What?
Don't worry, Captain Logan. This will be both delicious and refreshing.
Doomsvins.
For posterity's sake,
I'm not finished.
I am Doomsvins, and this is the end of Spawn Year.
I'm not finished.
Don't come home.
Captain Logan, welcome back to the land of the living. We had almost given up hope that you would ever wake up. You should really lay off the Mountain Dew. If you don't take care of yourself, all sorts of unexpected misfortunes can befall you.
Doomsvins. I was just with you, and you were spraying me with coke.
I can only imagine where your subconscious has been all these months.
What are you doing in my house?
It's not exactly your house anymore, Captain Logan. But I'll explain that all over breakfast. After which you'll be on your merry little way.
Where is my wife? Where is Jason?
Rise and shine, Captain Logan. You have a brand new year ahead of you.
You did it. You married Doomsvins.
I know this is a lot to take in, but
But I'm brilliant, and your wife has discovered that she has excellent taste in men. Fortunately, your long period of sugar-induced unconsciousness provided her with the perspective that she needed to see it.
I don't believe this.
What more proof do you need?
How long?
what?
How long was I out before you decided to get married to the clone I had made of my best friend?
Couple months?
It was a fast but smooth transition. Doomsvins is the epitome of efficiency, even in matters of the domestic variety.
I couldn't help myself. Doomsvins is great.
At
For
everything. She knows.
You've got some sorta mind control device, don't you?
I don't need a mind control device when I have such an exquisitely genius mind. The long and the short of it is, I'm your intellectual superior. In every way. I could have made you rich, beyond your wildest dreams. Instead, you let your petty, childish love of lowbrow entertainment rule your heart and mind, and you threw me out on the street without another thought. And when you ever so conveniently took yourself out of commission with one of your many embarrassing addictions, I moved in and gave your family everything they ever wanted. Geekvolution, now Doomsvolution, is a multi-million subscriber channel. Cooking with Doomsvits is a cable television sensation. I have not only outclassed you in every endeavor you have ever held, but I've elevated the culture at large. I review opera, poetry, modern art, fine cuisine. I have turned your audience away from that trite minutia you once critiqued with that loquacious mock sophistication and increased my audience 100-fold. Superhero Rewind is a thing of the past, and no one talks about it or you any longer.
That's what this was always about. You were jealous of my success.
I was created to make you better, and I would have done that had you treated me like an independent thinking individual and not some programmed automaton.
I know. I had a few revelations while I was under. I was horrible to you, Doomsvents. And for that, I am truly sorry. But I am not going to let you take my family away from me.
They're already mine. Your wife now wants for nothing, and your son's college education is all but paid for.
Jason.
Come on in here, son.
Oh my god. Jason?
It's Doomsday.
Let's face it, Captain Logan. The better man won. The creation has surpassed the creator. I thank you for giving me life, but I've now rendered you obsolete. What was yours is now mine. And unlike you, I sincerely hope that my progeny will surpass even my extraordinary accomplishments.
Sarah.
No, he's right. We've outgrown you. I told you not to wake up.
You know what they say, you snooze, you lose. So, it's come to this now, has it?
This can't be real.
You still think you're in a dream? You may think this all seems like a nightmare, but it's one of your own making.
My own making. What did you do with my comics?
I've sold all of that direct to build startup capital to improve your pitiful excuse for business. Captain Logan, this is unbecoming. Why can't you simply accept your defeat gracefully and move on?
Why would Tiny Adam West groom me for a fight he knew I couldn't win, and then pit me up against the Coke Redeemer a day before my last entry?
I think you need professional help. I'd be happy to make some calls.
You know what I'm talking about. It was you the entire time. You did everything you could to make me miss an entry. You even made me think I'd killed you so that I'd fall into a fit of remorse and give up. You know, every time something didn't work, you had a contingency plan. There was always some way to make me more confused or distracted or to drive me bonkers.
I wish I could take credit for that scheme. Clearly the part about driving you bonkers worked swimmingly.
When I was in that alleyway, you pretended you were dead. But you were here the whole time. I mean, it was all you. All leading to this moment. You hoped one of those random elements would drive me to lose my nerve. But Tiny Adam West, he was the trump card. A huge, elaborate setup, all designed as a last-ditch effort in case everything else failed. Captain Cog trying to convince me I'd wake up if I stopped reviewing. Freakadoo trying to turn me into as much of a maniac as he was. And the Spawn transformation, designed to make me terrified I was turning into a thing that had come to represent everything I didn't want to be. If all that training and fighting and finally dying could make me think even for a moment that terrible existence was over, and that this place was real, you would have won. I'd have skipped that final comic. And after all of those days and weeks and months, after almost an entire year of Spawn reviews, you'd have buried me alive in a grave, just like you said you would on day one.
Let me get this straight. You believe that you're still in a coma, and that somehow I'm responsible, not the Mountain Dew. Still blaming me for your failures.
I don't know how he did it, but yeah, I think Doomsvince, the real Doomsvince, is responsible for all of this. It's like some kind of computer program, designed to have you do and say everything the real Doomsvince would were he here, based on my actions and choices. The rules never changed, even when the set dressing and characters did. You once told me that it would always be possible for me to review on time. And that means it's still possible now.
So you believe that in order to escape this topsy-turvy reality that you believe you're in, you have to review a comic book?
Yeah. In fact, I'd bet my life on it. Where's my car?
It's in the garage.
I want my keys. This is my house. It's still my car.
Your wife signed everything over to me when we married.
I wasn't dead! And I can prove it! You can't do that!
Maybe not, but you're not really concerned with that right now, are you? You don't have time to get your personal effects in order before the day is out. I have no intention of helping you.
I don't need you! I've been sitting in one place for most of the year anyway. I could use the exercise!
You know what they say about revenge and the cold? To my recollection, something to do with a dish.
You may be asking yourself, why would Doomsvince, the master of all doom, eat hamburgers? Delicious. And they're made of burger. For the meat preparation, you will have the following ingredients. Meat. Egg white, because it moistens the lean meat. The following spices are necessary. Paprika, cayenne pepper, garlic, black pepper, and salt. You can either mix it.
Todd McFarlane isn't a writer, even after 20 years and a great deal of practice. He never managed to turn Al Simmons into a fully realized character, and after 16 years of getting absolutely nowhere with him, despite countless reinventions and supposed new directions and plot devices to excuse Al's inconsistent behavior and general unlikability, he decided to start all over with a new character, but unfortunately for me, not a new continuity. And 4 years later, Jim Downing is in exactly the same boat. Yes, with all the publication delays and maddeningly decompressed storytelling, kids have entered and graduated from high school in the time it's taken McFarlane and Carlton to wake Jim from a coma, make him a celebrity, see him kill and torture people and creatures for answers about his past, bring back Malbolgia, and only in the last 4 issues explain who he was before the coma and why the Spawn symbiote chose him, neither of which seems to remotely fit with the other yet. Jim Downing is another two-dimensional, horrible human being. Like Al, I know why he hurt people, but I don't know how he became capable of such callous disregard for human life in the first place. He doesn't yet have Al's bred over generations for evil excuse. Issue 220 opens with a long and almost completely superfluous inner monologue that's only useful if you're new to the book and need a recap, and as usual backtracks and reworks stuff, so if you know what's going on, you have to adjust what you've been told before. McFarlane isn't just revising history from before 187, he's retconning stuff all the way up, and if I seem less than surprised, that's because I've grown accustomed to trust nothing I'm ever told in this book, so I can't be disappointed when things I actually like don't count anymore. We're told Jim did unconscionable things when he was director of the project, because he was obsessed with perfection. Really? Project Ragnarok? Nobody is terrified to work for Project Ragnarok? I still have no idea why he became so fixated on the notion of genetic superiority, but more to the point, how does Jim suddenly know this? He pretty clearly knew no more about his past after I got to see a lot of it in 216, and nothing Malbolgia told him about his soul being an angel that tried to kill God jogged his memories. But now, just because this is the 20th anniversary special, and McFarlane's writing a whole tribute and callback to the first issue, Jim is suddenly having random flashes to his old life, like Al did. If Jim's gonna finally start remembering stuff for no reason, couldn't we have had this from the beginning so we didn't have to read about a blank slate for 30 issues? Alright, so maybe his fight with Bolgi did somehow jog his memories, but why is he only remembering his life as the director then, and not as the rebel spirit who went on a one-man war against the Almighty himself? And sure, there could be reasonable explanations for all of this, but this issue doesn't follow the events of last issue at all. Almost nothing about the revelations we got during the Bolgi fight are mentioned here. So all that stuff about the Spawn suit trying to get into heaven and control the universe feels like a giant tease that might not be paid off for another 4 years. It's hard to tell if McFarlane wants to make us wait on that stuff, or if it's yet another case of his not liking what the last writer did and moving away from it. He's keeping Kradansky on board after this, but taking back the writing duties from Carlton. Now that I may finally have served my sentence of Spawn review hell, I may skim issue 250 when it comes out, just to see if I'm even a little lost skipping 30 issues. I really doubt I will be. So now Jim killed his girlfriend in the past because she betrayed him, and not for information Wynn insisted he obtain, which is not at all what Carlton led me to believe, and his main motivation now is keeping Mark, Susan, and Sarah safe, worrying that they're in danger while Hell, Heaven, and other factions are all after him. If you've never read this comic before now, Jim is a misguided government science director trying to piece together and make up for his sordid past. But if you're me, he's a delusional maniac who's telling himself anything to feel better about himself. So what actually happens in this issue? Well, Jim holds another press conference and announces he's going to rebuild Rat City with his new foundation, I'd imagine in order to control the Dead Zone. And somehow, Cagliostro is back. And that's it. 2 pages of story. The rest is Jim rambling to himself about how horrible he is for teleporting with Sarah through the hopscotch shadows and trying to understand his past. And that's all to take us back to Nostalgiaville, to revisit all those iconic images and layouts of a comic that had so many printings it'd be as cheap to wrap your Christmas presents in as buying wrapping paper. You could just reread that issue, but McFarlane wants to celebrate one of the only really solid and well-executed Spawn comics by wasting a whole issue ripping himself off. So we're treated to pages on end of Spawn being confused, news anchors telling us things we can infer reading the story, a full-page spread you have to turn sideways to read, and one token fight so it feels like something's happening. And sadly, no bubbles. This whole series would have been more bearable if only there had been more bubbles. In the back, there's a long interview with McFarlane about choices he made in the first issue, and it feels awkwardly like the book spent the whole last 20 years trying to live up to that comic, but that all McFarlane ever had was a concept and no direction. This issue is, I think, a testament to that. There's also a timeline of events in the publication, and it's like all of Spawn eras flashing before my eyes. There have been wonderful, haunting, and chilling comics throughout my arduous journey, and some of them were McFarlane's. 5, 29, 39, and some of the most eye-popping, provocative, truly unique and special artwork I've seen in a comic book. Krasinski draws a worthy and reverential tribute to McFarlane's original work here. McFarlane's relationship with his own creation could have been so much more if he'd only let Spawn develop naturally and to be himself.
Show me your hands!
Just working late, officer.
With a shattered window?
I lost my keys and this paperwork is really important.
Put the pen down and come around. Drop the pen and show me your hands.
Stocky Frank Miller Batman?
Are you high or something?
Or something.
Put the pen down and come around.
Just let me finish this last sentence.
No, just put the pen down. Turn around. Come out here. Get on your knees. Don't look at me. What the hell are you?
Watch your language, officer. I am sick to death of that word. Signed, for the very last time, Captain Spawn.
Congratulations, Captain Logan. You have defeated me. Once again.
I'm back in the purgatory.
Of your own making.
Yes, of my own making. But it's not really my making, is it? It's Doomsvince's. And you're not him.
No, I am not. You managed to put a lot of it together. I'm an approximation of Doomsvince, designed to crush your spirit. The goal of this program was to destroy you emotionally, with the very childish activity that has consumed your life and ruined Doomsvince's.
But it wasn't about the comics or the superheroes or even Doomsvince's low opinion of my lowbrow interests. No, Doomsvince is angry because I made him and then didn't appreciate him for who he really is.
I knew I was capable of great things. I only wanted you to be proud of me.
You know, I hate what you put me through. It was sadistic and cruel and unusual. But you know, I have to admit, I'm impressed. I never saw Doomsvince as anything but a failed experiment. It would never have occurred to me to think about how I made him feel. He was no good at any of the things that I actually had him built to do. But it turns out that he's actually brilliant.
He is?
Absolutely! I mean, all of Doomsvince's plots before were lame and barely illegal, but Spawn here is inspired. It's diabolical. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to slice my own hands off or bash my skull in just so I wouldn't have to write anymore. How many times you got right in my cranium and knew just where to turn the knife. Doomsvince is a nefarious mastermind.
But I failed.
Well, you didn't manage to bury me alive, but that's because you succeeded at something else. If all supervillains were judged on how well their nefarious schemes worked out, they'd all be failures. You made me take a good hard look at myself and the choices I've made. You made me realize that a lot of the way Doomsvince turned out was my fault. Doomsvince isn't pathetic. He's sympathetic.
But I wasn't programmed to make you care. I was programmed to destroy you.
Doomsvince has made his whole life about destroying mine. What would he do if he succeeded? I mean, sure, he's got his hobbies. He's got his cooking and his theater and his opera. But something would be missing. The thing about arch nemeses is that we define each other. I made him, and in a way, he's made me. He's made me better. You said it yourself. You just want me to be proud of you. And as loath as I am to admit it, I am.
Will you make sure he knows that? The real Doomsvince.
I plan to do a lot more than that. I'm gonna make this right. That's a promise.
So long, Captain Logan. It was a pleasure tormenting you.
See you later, artificially intelligent Doomsvince.
36 seconds until 2013. You can feel the energy coming up in Times Square. 30 seconds. Get everybody around the TV and get ready to celebrate. We are at 20 seconds. Here we go, 15.
Happy New Year!
Oh man, you look fantastic. Please, tell me you're not married to Doomsvince.
I told you not to drink too much Mountain Dew.
Sarah, why does the basement look exactly the same? Why would you leave me downstairs for an entire year in a coma? And come to think of it, why do I have no neck strain?
Did you fall asleep?
When was the last time you saw me?
Like an hour ago? I put Jason down to bed, and I asked you to come upstairs for some champagne, but you were too busy.
So it's New Year's Day 2013.
Well, yeah.
It hasn't been a year. It's been an hour.
That must have been the most condensed dream in the history of power naps.
Sarah, it wasn't a dream. It could not have just been a dream.
This goes without saying, but your New Year's resolution is going to be weaning yourself off Mountain Dew, right?
I need you to look for anything unusual. He had to have been down here.
Who?
Doomsvince.
Doomsvince? I think starting tomorrow you should take some time off, like a whole year.
Look, I know this seems insane, but I'm telling you, there is something down here that doesn't belong.
This isn't going to become a New Year's tradition, is it? Ransacking our own basement? Well, this would qualify as unusual.
Sarah, I'm gonna be up the rest of tonight.
Why? Doing what?
I need to talk to Dan Torrey.
Oh, thank God. Are you okay? How do you feel? How many fingers am I holding up? What's the Shredder's real name? Who played Spider-Man before Andrew Garfield?
6, Oroku Saki, and Tobey Maguire. Seriously, that's your lucidity test?
I was afraid you'd come back, Twihard or something.
So you did know about this?
Of course I did. Did you get my letters?
Never stop reviewing?
I'm so relieved you found them. It wasn't easy getting anything in the program past Doomsvents. I'm sorry I didn't elaborate further, but I had to be careful. A couple of words on shredded up pieces of paper or mixed in with a dozen or other phrases in a skull doesn't take up too much space in the program, but anything bigger, he would have noticed. Doomsvents scrutinized every megabyte of data. If you hadn't taken my advice, things could have gotten really confusing and messy. All you had to do was read, review, and ignore everything Doomsvents did or said.
Hell, it might have helped if I'd had a heads up before I went into a second sugar coma and wound up turning into Spawn in an alleyway.
Oh no. What else happened?
Well, let's see. I killed a living jacket, Doomsvents pretended to be my wife, my skin turned green, talking action figures made me think I'd gone insane, I murdered Doomsvents, a 3-foot-tall Adam West made me fight a coke monster that turned out to be Doomsvents, and then I wound up in a reality where Doomsvents was married to my wife.
So you finished the program in the absolute most complicated and grueling way possible.
You, sir, have a demented imagination.
That was all Doomsvents, I swear. I just created the technology and programmed it, except Violator's song selections. Doomsvents made me pick those. I'm not really sure why.
Dirty Dancing fan, huh?
You didn't find the first note? The one in the front pockets of the jean jacket?
Why would I have ever thought to look through my pockets?
I don't know. I probably would have.
Well, I just want to know why you would help my arch nemesis turn my mind into string cheese.
He's been watching me for months. His doomsayers are everywhere. They follow me to school. They dig through my garbage. I'm not sure how many of your subscribers are really Captain Logan fans. Remember the time a while back he stole your keys and broke into the Geekvolution P.O. box?
Yeah, he had some kind of transporter beam.
My invention. He stole it from me. Ever since then, he's been using it to teleport things out of my house. I have a jamming signal, but one of his minions broke in and destroyed it. While I was building another one, he got a hold of something I should have told you about a long time ago.
The defective clones that predated Doomsvents.
They're not actually reanimated corpses. They're dead. Some of them not even fully formed, but I kept them in stasis for study. I needed to analyze their remains to build Doomsvents, but then I kept them around just in case.
In case you decided to, what, make another clone?
You said it yourself. Doomsvents was defective. I got so close that time, I couldn't help myself. I'm a perfectionist. I built Vince 2.0 for you, yeah, but it was also a personal challenge. I broke huge ground in genetic engineering.
Please tell me you haven't made another clone.
No, of course not. After this, I plan to discontinue that line of research.
So Doomsvents blackmailed you.
He was going to expose our crimes, using the underdeveloped clones as evidence. I didn't want to help him, but I had to think about what it would do to you and your family in the long run. And I had to think about myself. I'd have been hauled off to jail for unethical and illegal genetic manipulation, not to mention my parents would have found my laboratory.
You have a laboratory?
You know how people are always wondering what that room back behind me is when they watch our videos? Leads to a secret passage. The wall flips around when you turn the head on a Spider-Man figure. It's pretty awesome.
Look, I understand why you did what you did. There is plenty of blame to go around. I should have never had you clone Vince in the first place. But then after that, I should never have driven Doomsvents out of the house. This is all on me.
I'm just glad you're alive.
Alive? You mean I could have died?
That transceiver sent a beam directly into your cerebral cortex and drew directly on your memory and personality to create a lot of what you experienced. There was no way to know how you might respond to severe trauma. When Doomsvents killed you as the Coke Redeemer, that was all part of a larger subroutine in the program. That probably wouldn't have done anything to shock your brain or give you a heart attack, but if you had committed suicide, that definitely could have done it.
Well, I'm glad that was the one stupid thing I managed not to do. Wow, the whole thing only took an hour, but I have an entire year's worth of memories in my head. What would have happened if I hadn't gotten all the reviews finished? If I'd been buried alive like Doomsvents threatened?
My device can compact any amount of experiences into a relative time frame. A year takes an hour. If you had failed, you would have experienced an entire lifetime trapped 12 feet under. In reality, it would have taken about a day. And I doubt very much if you'd be anything like as well adjusted as you are right now.
Wow. Dan, I need you to make another one.
What? No, Cap. I know what you're thinking, and revenge is not the answer.
You're right. Revenge isn't the answer. But Doomsvince is doing all of this to prove to me that he had something to contribute to the channel in the first place. And he's done that now. Dan, the answer is Spawn here.
Where are you going with all this?
I can't just show up on his doorstep. So I'm going to need you to force him to listen. I need you to create a message for me. One that he'll have no choice but to consider.
Yeah, of course. It's the least I can do.
Hello, Doomsvince. Welcome to hell.
What do you hope to accomplish with all of this? When I get out of here, I'm
after
going
everything you put me through, it would be poetic justice if I forced you to go through the same year of hell I did. But that's not why you're here.
How primitive.
You're here because I have a proposition for you, and because I know this is the only way you'll listen to what I have to say. You built this thing to break me, but it had an unintended side effect. Spawn here showed me that you not only have the makings of a great supervillain, you have the makings of a great storyteller.
I do?
Doomsvince, Spawn here isn't just an elaborate mind torture device. It's a potentially revolutionary web series. It'll be something the internet has never seen before. A daily review series, structured around a narrative conceit. People will tune in for the reviews, but they'll stay for this relatable story of a misunderstood clone who seems to seek revenge on his creator, but who really just wants to prove that his creator was wrong to ignore him. That he had something worthwhile to contribute all along. I want to make it up to you by producing your fantastic idea as a web series. No one will believe that anything they're seeing really happened. It'll seem so ridiculous, we can tell the whole story, crimes against humanity and all, and our viewers will think we just have overactive imaginations. I'm willing to go through it all again, if you're behind me this time. Let's put the past behind us and create something positive out of all this madness. But whatever you decide, just sign your name in that notebook and you'll wake up in your bed back at home.
I am Doomsvince. And this is day 1 of Spawn Year.
Let's get to work.
Put me
got defective joy. When you were really my first little boy, you had your own ideas, and that should have been fine. When I shunned you off like Frankenstein, we'll make it fun, yeah. This time I reap what I have done. We'll make it fun, yeah. My look how you have grown. We'll make it fun, yeah. You're not evil, just misunderstood. We'll make it fun, yeah. Now I'm doing what a father should. Make it fun, yeah. Make it fun, yeah. We'll make it fun.
Who are you?
I'm Spot.
Ah, you are absolutely terrifying. Hey, you want to do my audio next time I do the Captain Spawn voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to keep him up to midnight, but it's not working out. He keeps nodding off during episodes of Spawnier.
You were watching Spawnier?
Yeah.
What episode were you watching?
102.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Sarah, I'm still working on Spawnier. I'm not even close to that. I got like 90 episodes left in me.
Well, do you think you can come up for a few minutes after I put him down and watch the ball drop?
I feel like I need to use every minute I've got to finish this because, I mean, I promised everybody I would get this thing done, and I've still got all these shows to make.
Do you think you'll be able to make all 90 in one night?
No, of course not. You're absolutely right. Jason, if you're Spawn, who am I?
You're my brother.
I might not be done with Spawnier, but I'm not that incompetent. All right, come on, kid. Let's put you to bed.
We'll make it fun, yeah. You built this plane, now I gotta fly it. We'll make it fun, yeah. You showed me what you can do. We'll make it fun, yeah. Doom's Fence, this is for you. We'll make it fun, yeah.
How does this happen? Like, I can prove that. I thought they looked pretty good.
Yeah, there were things about it that I liked, especially like the action scene when they were sliding down the mountain. I thought that was really cool.
Hold on, Dan.
Can I get everybody's attention, please?
Speech.
Please take your seats.
Speech. Speech.
Oh, angels and devils preserve us. A speech.
I'd like to hear what he has to say. What's wrong with the speech?
Well, we're finally here. We finally made it. And I know for a while there it looked like we might never actually get here. Here is a series that was supposed to take a year because it actually, you know, the original thing, the original horrible hell that Doom's Vince put me through was a whole year at least for me. And but producing that, I mean, was pretty ambitious. We had all these things that we had to do that Dan Torrey, that the terrifying minds of Dan Torrey and Doom's Vince put together came up with. So like we had to come up with how to do effects like putting a hole in my chest.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
And all of that, yeah, and all that stuff.
Believe it or not, this is all prolonging your pain.
So, anyway, thank you guys for being patient with me and for helping us get here. I know 365 days turned into more like 643 days.
Who's counting?
But here we are, and finally, you guys are going to get to see the final fruits of our labors.
We don't have to sit through all 40 hours of it, do we?
Cool your jets, Doomy Britches.
I've got nothing going on, Cap.
What we're doing tonight is just the three-part finale. Just the epic, exciting three-part finale. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
Ooh, yes! Neat. That means we get to watch me beat up Captain Logan! Again! It just never gets old.
Before that happens, I gotta say thanks to all of you guys. This could not have happened without every single person in this room. Thanks to Tiny Adam West. Thanks to stocky Frank Miller Batman, his lackey. Thanks to the Coke Angel, also Doom Sarah, and little known fact, sometimes me. Thanks to Vince, and sometimes stand-in Dooms Vince, and to Mad Scientist Dan, and also to Brandon.
Thank you very much.
But most of all, I gotta say thanks to my arch nemesis, Dooms Vince. Dooms Vince, you put me through hell, man. You put me through hell
Amen
twice.
to that.
Twice! And then all these people in this room, a little bit of my hell, but nobody knows the full extent.
You are certainly welcome.
Dooms Vince, it was the most horrendous and diabolical experience of my entire existence. But at the end of the day, it made me a better husband, it made me a better father, it made me a better person. And for that reason, I have to ask everybody to raise your glasses to my arch enemy, Vince 2.0, otherwise known as Dooms Vince.
To Dooms Vince.
To Dooms Vince.
I am Dooms Vince, and this is day 364 of Spawn Year.
So, you're the emissary of Coke. What are you, 3 days old? Oh, yeah, there's your bottle. Oh, that's for me, isn't it? Oh, that celebrating is a little premature, don't you think? You know, if you wanted a real challenge, you'd review some of these Spawn comics.
My logic.
All right, let's do this thing. Ah! Ah!
What? Don't worry, Captain Logan. This will be both delicious and refreshing.
Doomsman.
For posterity's sake,
I'm not finished.
I am Doomsvins, and this is the end of Spawn Year.
I'm not finished.
You probably need a middle piece.
Sure. I enjoyed middle pieces. I'm like, yeah.
With a skull.
Thank you. My favorite part of the body, the skull.
Hey, Captain Logan.
Hey, sorry for leaving you over here in this in this other room. We're all in the living room, but I wanted to know if you wanted some cake.
Oh, I would love some cake.
Do you want some cake? Okay. Now, do you have your teleporter handy? Your secret teleporter that we don't tell anyone?
Yeah, it looks to be working.
Is it? Good. Okay, cool. So, get it rigged up, and I'm gonna beam you this cake. Does this look? Is this a good size? Does this look good?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And it looks like it should fit through the technology here. Yep, I think we're all set.
All right, cool. Here we go. Let me know when you're ready. Here
I'm
it
all
is.
set.
All right, here we go. Yes, success! You got your cake. All right.
Delicious.
Vince, I'd like to thank you for your efforts in mimicry. Namely being me, and of course you weren't as good as I as being myself, but that's simply because I've had so much practice at being me, you see. And I do think that there was a certain amount of inspiration that you had in the mimicry of the zombie Vinces or the other clones. And because you have this certain vacancy that just lends itself well to being a zombie Vince, and you are so pleasantly idiotic sometimes. That I thought you had a role. You were born for this role. Do you understand me? I think that you have a certain something. Maybe not for that classic leading male, but maybe there's a certain character actor to you. I mean, you could definitely be any of the greats like Igor Or that one guy from that movie, it kind of looked like a bug.
How much of Spawn Year did we get correct? I mean, we're coming off, we're making a facsimile of what Cap experienced.
It's all factually. I'll tell you that mostly. I mean, there's just some stuff that was really hard to pull off. Like for instance, there's some little weird mistakes we made, like things that you just we were trying to get it done quickly, and I'll tell you what. Within the actual Spawn Year, Freakadoo's scythe did not have a barcode on it. That's the thing. We had a few viewers that were like, "Hey, Captain Logan, there's a barcode there." So breaking the illusion a little bit. There, Doomsman. There was some other stuff like that too, right? Now the teddy bear was like, you got that spot on.
Captain Logan, this entire experience has been enlightening.
Doomsman, I never thought I'd say this, but you are welcome here anytime.
I think we'll be seeing each other in the not too distant future. Au revoir.
Oh, Doomsman! You forgot this. You ought to keep it as a memento.
For old time's sake.
We don't have to sit through all 40 hours of it, do we? That sounds awful. I would like to have a restroom break in the middle if you don't mind. Maybe a few.
I just need one.
Can we order out for pizza?
Like a nap, to be frank. In fact, let it play. I'll take the nap right now.
I am Doomsvince. Doomsvince.
And action.
No cuts, just action. That's all we're about here. It's just action from end to night, from the beginning to the beginning, and from the end to the end.
I'll show you some action.
No, he's right. We've outgrown you. I told you not to look up.
All you get to say is, you know what they say.
I know, but I was just like, oh! I told you not to wake up.
If you don't take care of yourself, all sorts of unfortunate, unexpected misfortunes can befall you.
Unfortunate unexpecteds can befall you. You do a fair approximation of my wife if she was a supervillain.
I saw you read ahead, Captain Logan.
I am Tiny Adam West, and this is day 1 of Batman Year.
No, 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 I am not liking this! What is this, Bane year? Because reviewing now is the bane of my existence?
You will have 48 hours to review the whole of the Nightfall trilogy. Fail, and I will strip you of everything that makes you unique.
Whoa, Dad, is that you?
Whatever you do, don't clone me!
Who are you?